She's a black woman, pregnant, alone, locked in a room like a criminal. But when that door opened and her husband stepped in, armed with federal authority and fire in his eyes, everyone froze. He didn't need to yell. Justice walked in with him. And trust me, you'll want to see what happens next. Hit the like button, subscribe, and let this story open your eyes. It was the kind of morning that felt like a promise. The sun had just begun to filter through the skyline of Washington, D.C., painting the buildings in warm golds and silvers. Trees, lining the boulevard, swayed gently in the spring air. Soft petals falling like confetti on sidewalks polished by an early street cleaner's pass. Life moved with grace, the kind you don't notice until you slow down. But for Celeste Morgan, the morning felt heavier. She stood quietly on the marble steps of Aurora Women's Pavilion, one of the most prestigious private women's health centers in the city, the kind of place where floors gleamed like mirrors, and even the flowers in the vases looked like they had a personal stylist. Celeste wore a pale sky-blue maternity dress that hugged her 6-month bump with soft elegance. Her skin, a deep bronze gold, glowed under the sunlight. She looked like a painting, serene, radiant, but the world didn't seem to notice, or maybe it noticed too much. A couple exited the building, a man in a navy suit and a woman with perfectly ironed blonde hair. The woman's gaze flicked toward Celeste and lingered. Not long enough to be called a stare, but just enough to remind Celeste that she didn't belong in places like this, at least not in their eyes. She reached instinctively for the strap of her canvas tote bag, pulling it higher on her shoulder. It was worn at the edges, unlike the leather designer handbags carried by the women walking in and out of the pavilion. She shifted her weight, placed one hand gently on her belly, and whispered under her breath, "All right, baby. Just one checkup. Daddy will meet us inside." She glanced at her phone. 9:54 a.m. Her appointment was at 10:30. She liked being early. It gave her time to prepare, breathe, settle. Her husband, Julian, was supposed to meet her at the clinic. He'd called that morning to say there was an emergency at the district attorney's office, something that needed his signature and presence. "I'll be there, baby," he'd promised. And she believed him. Julian always kept his word. Still, there was a sting to walking into that building alone. Today was supposed to be special. Their first 4D ultrasound. A chance to see their daughter's face, to hear her heartbeat echo through the speakers in full digital clarity. A glimpse at life becoming real. Instead, Celeste took a quiet breath and approached the doors alone. Thailand hissed open like a secret being kept. Inside, the contrast was immediate. The air was colder, not just from the high-end air conditioning that hummed above, but from something more invisible. A stillness, an observation, the kind of silence money buys, not to comfort but to contain. The reception area looked like the lobby of a luxury hotel. Smooth white marble, lavender walls, gold-trimmed signage, flower arrangements on every surface, magazines carefully fanned out on the glass table. Every chair was leather, each seat spaced to say, "Privacy here isn't just a courtesy, it's a boundary." Celeste stepped in slowly, feeling the eyes without seeing them. A woman in a white cashmere wrap glanced up from her phone. A middle-aged man in a tailored gray suit blinked once, then looked away. A receptionist at the far desk, a young white woman in her mid-20s, looked up, locked eyes for half a second, then dropped her gaze to the monitor like nothing had happened. Celeste didn't flinch. She'd seen this before. She stepped up to the desk. "Good morning, Celeste Morgan. I have a 10:30 with Dr. Caldwell," she said clearly, calmly. The receptionist's fingers hovered over her keyboard. She looked Celeste over once, subtle but undeniable, and then typed something slowly, deliberately. "You're here for Dr. Caldwell?" she asked, the tone laced with something between confusion and suspicion, like she didn't quite believe. Yes," Celeste nodded. "Scheduled 2 weeks ago. I confirmed it last night over the phone." A long pause. Then the receptionist slid a clipboard across the marble counter with the kind of slow, reluctant motion that made it feel like a test, not a task. "Please fill this out." Celeste accepted it without reaction. She turned, found a seat in the far corner of the waiting room and lowered herself into it slowly. Her back ached a little. Baby girl was growing fast, and she adjusted herself gently before taking out a pen from her tote. As she began filling out the form, she could hear the faint rustling of whispers. The woman across from her, Chanel, purse clutched tightly to her side, leaned toward her partner, eyes flicking toward Celeste. The man beside her shifted uncomfortably, pretending to read the magazine in his hands. Celeste kept her head down. Smooth, careful handwriting. Every line filled out with precision. Years of existing in places where she had to prove she deserved to be there had taught her how to perform calm under scrutiny. But her fingers trembled slightly. She wanted Julian there, not just as a husband or father-to-be, but as a shield, as someone whose mere presence reminded rooms like this that she had every right to exist in them. A text buzzed her phone. Running late. 10 minutes tops. I'm coming. Love you. She closed her eyes. Breathed in, breathed out. She opened them again and caught her reflection in the glass across the room. She didn't look like a threat. She didn't look like someone who didn't belong. She looked like a black woman trying to bring life into the world with dignity. And yet, every surface in that clinic, from the polished tile to the distant stairs, told her otherwise. That was the crack of morning. Not the sunlight, not the soft wind on the street, but the hairline fracture between how she saw herself and how the world insisted on seeing her. And somewhere beyond those velvet walls, behind a door that would soon open, the real storm was waiting. The door opened with a whisper of cold air and the faintest click of shoes on polished tile. Celeste. Morgan. The voice was sharp, flat, lacking everything that might resemble warmth or welcome. Celeste looked up to see a nurse standing stiffly at the hallway entrance. Pale scrubs, hair pulled back in a tight bun, clipboard held like a weapon. No smile, no greeting, just protocol. Celeste stood slowly, one hand supporting her lower back, the other gripping the strap of her tote. She offered a quiet nod and a small, polite smile as she approached, but the nurse had already turned and started walking. No. How are you feeling today? No. Congratulations on your pregnancy. Just footsteps and silence. Celeste followed, her down the hallway. It was immaculate. Spotless floors, walls painted in muted pastels, the air perfumed with antiseptic and artificial lavender. Music played faintly overhead, something instrumental and overly cheerful. It was supposed to be calming. It wasn't. As they passed framed posters of white mothers holding white newborns, Celeste felt her chest tighten. Every brochure, every hallway photo, every baby on the wall looked the same. There were no families that looked like hers. She wondered, fleetingly, if she would have been treated differently if her husband had walked in beside her. Tall, commanding, dressed in federal black. But right now she was just a black woman, alone, pregnant, waiting to be seen. The nurse stopped at a door marked 3B. She opened it without a word and gestured inside with a tilt of her head. The doctor will be with you shortly. Then, just like that, she was gone. Celeste stepped into the room. It was cold, not in temperature but in tone. Clinical, stark, white walls, silver instruments. One monitor sat blinking softly in the corner. A tray of medical supplies sat untouched beside the bed. Everything too clean, too controlled. She sat carefully on the edge of the examination table, adjusting the hem of her dress. Her palms smoothed the fabric over her belly, an unconscious gesture, soothing her child more than herself. She checked the time on her phone. 4:43 a.m. Julian was late. Only by a few minutes, but each one felt heavier than the last. The silence in the room amplified everything. Her heartbeat, the buzz of the fluorescent light, the shifting of her weight on the crinkling exam paper. Then the door opened, not gently, not tentatively, with intent. And Dr. Miranda Caldwell stepped. She looked like a surgeon out of a high-budget drama. Tall, angular, wrapped in a pristine white coat, heels clicking against the floor, clipboard in hand. Blonde hair pinned with surgical precision, lips tight, eyes colder than the room. She didn't smile, didn't extend her hand, didn't say hello. She simply stopped and stared. Celeste straightened. "Good morning," she said softly. "I'm Celeste Morgan. I believe we're doing the 4D ultrasound today?" The doctor's eyes drifted downward, not medically but judgmentally. Her gaze traveled from Celeste's belly to her dress to her shoes, pausing just a little too long. She didn't blink. "You came alone," she said flatly. It wasn't a question. Celeste's smile faltered. "My husband had to handle an emergency at work," she replied, keeping her voice calm. "He's on his way." Dr. Caldwell turned toward the counter and began flipping through a file with exaggerated care. The silence was suffocating. Then came the knife. "Well," the doctor said, her voice dipped in sarcasm. "Let me guess. You're not entirely sure who the father is, or maybe he decided not to stick around. Happens more often than you'd believe." Celeste blinked. For a moment, she thought she misheard. "I'm sorry," she said, voice a whisper. Dr. Caldwell didn't look at her. "This is a high-standard facility," she said, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "We serve mothers who care about their health, their children, and their futures. We're not a drop-in clinic." The implication was clear. Celeste stood slowly, pulse thudding. "I scheduled this appointment 2 weeks ago," she said, trying to stay composed. "I confirmed it last night. I came here respectfully." Dr. Caldwell turned to face her fully. Her posture shifted, chin slightly raised, eyes narrowing. "You people are always respectful when you want something," she said, voice lowering to a hiss. "But then you bring drama, disruption. Accusations, not today, not in my facility." Celeste's hands clenched at her sides. "I came here for my baby," she said through clenched teeth. "Not to be insulted." Dr. Caldwell stepped forward, and yet here you are, making a scene. Then, with the performative air of someone used to controlling the room, she turned back to the countertop, looked down at the tray, and suddenly stiffened. "My watch," she said, eyes narrowing. "Cartier Platinum Band. I set it right here." She turned back to Celeste slowly. "It's gone." Celeste's brows furrowed. "I haven't touched anything." The doctor didn't listen. "I'm saying," she said coldly, "we've had enough charity cases walk in here and walk out with more than they came in with. Security will be here shortly." Before Celeste could speak, the doctor opened the door, stepped out, and let it click shut behind her, leaving Celeste alone, in a room that suddenly felt much more like a trap than a clinic. She stared at the floor. Heart pounding, hands on her belly, baby kicking lightly, as if feeling the mother's stress. She reached for her phone, but even as her fingers touched the screen, she heard it. Footsteps. Measured. Purposeful. Getting louder. Coming for her. The footsteps outside the door were like a countdown. Not rushed, not chaotic. Deliberate. Slow. Heavy. Celeste's heart thudded harder with every step, the tension coiling, tighter in her chest. Her hands instinctively moved to her belly. The baby shifted gently inside, like even the child could feel that something was very wrong. Then the door opened. 2 men entered. Both were white. Both wore dark uniforms marked with a thin security badge. One was older, with graying temples, and the weary face of someone used to bad news. The other was younger, stockier, chewing gum with a slow, mocking rhythm that echoed louder than it should have in the sterile silence. Neither of them smiled. Neither of them greeted her. "Miss Morgan," the older one said, voice clipped, almost mechanical. "We've had a report of missing property. A watch." Celeste didn't move. "I don't know anything about a watch. The doctor said she left it in this room, and that you were the only one here. I haven't touched anything. You can check the cameras." The younger one snorted softly, chewing louder. "We'll sort this out downstairs," the older one said, already stepping closer. "You'll have a chance to explain in the security office." "I'm pregnant," Celeste said firmly, backing away. "I don't feel safe being escorted like this. I'd like to call my husband." The younger one spoke now, voice laced with dry amusement. "You'll get your phone back when this is cleared. For now, we need to move." Celeste looked at the high space between them and the door. She had nowhere to go. Reluctantly, she grabbed her bag and stood. She kept one hand over her stomach as if to protect what was still unseen, still becoming. The walk through the hallway was different now. Earlier, it had felt cold and clinical. Now it felt like a corridor leading into something darker. The soft music overhead was gone, or maybe it was still there, but drowned out by the white noise of her racing thoughts. They didn't take her through the front. They moved through. A back hallway, past locked doors marked staff only, past storage closets and steel supply cabinets, past worlds patients were never supposed to see. The air smelled of bleach and bureaucracy. Eventually, they stopped at a heavy gray door with no sign. The younger officer opened it. Inside was a small, dimly lit security room. A single fluorescent panel flickered above, casting a pale stutter of light over the space. There was a metal desk in the center, a couple of filing cabinets pushed into corners, and a wall of outdated monitors showing low-res black and white surveillance feeds. It didn't look like a place for patients. It looked like a place where people disappeared for a while. "Sit," the younger one ordered. Celeste hesitated, her eyes moving to the hard plastic chair bolted to the floor. "Please," she said quietly. "I just want to call my husband. He works for the Department of Justice." "Phone," the older one interrupted, holding out his hand. She clutched her bag tighter. "You can't just—" "You're not under arrest," he said calmly. "But you are being detained while we investigate. You'll have to cooperate." Her mouth opened in disbelief. "I didn't take anything. I didn't even go near her desk. This is insane." "We're not here to argue," the younger Yun cut in. "We're here to verify the report." Celeste swallowed. Her throat burned. Her eyes stung, but she didn't let the tears fall. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled as she handed it over. The younger officer snatched it, powered it off, and dropped it into a drawer with a loud, final-sounding thunk. She sat, slowly, carefully, every muscle in her body tense. The chair was cold, unforgiving. Like everything else in this place, the room wasn't locked, but it didn't need to be. She felt trapped. The older officer scribbled something on a form. The younger one leaned against the wall, chewing, watching her with thinly veiled disdain. His gaze wasn't just dismissive, it was entertained. Like her discomfort was a movie he'd seen before, and he already knew the ending. Celeste stared at the blank wall in front of her. There were no windows, no clock, just the hum of the broken light and the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears. "Came here for a medical appointment," she said softly, but with steel beginning to form beneath her voice. "I came here for my baby, and I've been treated like a criminal. For what?" Neither man answered. She pressed her hands to her belly. The baby shifted again. Tiny movements, a flutter of life reminding her that she had more than herself to fight for. She inhaled through her nose, counted to 4, exhaled slowly. She thought about Julian. Where was he now? Was he at the front desk? Were they lying to him? Were they stalling? Would he walk away, confused? No. She closed her eyes. No. Julian wouldn't stop. Julian would ask. Julian would find her. Her husband didn't work for the government because he liked authority. He worked there because he hated watching people be abused by it. He would come. He always came. The younger officer yawned and said without looking at her, "Ladies always make a performance out of this." She clenched her jaw, her lip trembled, but not from fear, from rage, from insult, from the exhaustion of having to prove she wasn't dangerous, not angry, not dramatic, just human. She sat in that chair for what felt like an hour, but it might have only been 10 minutes. No one asked her questions. No one presented evidence. They just kept her, like possession, like property. But then there was a shift, not in the room, outside, a voice, firm, authoritative. "I need to see my wife." "Right. Now." The guards froze. Celeste's head snapped toward the door, and in that moment something inside her began to rise. The helplessness, it cracked, and through it, A new sound took shape, the sound of justice, coming for her. At the front desk of Aurora, Women's Pavilion, the air had shifted. It wasn't obvious at first. The same receptionist sat behind the marble counter, fingers typing at a controlled, leisurely pace. Patients still waited in quiet discomfort, flipping through glossy magazines and avoiding eye contact. The lobby music played at the same low, soft volume. Everything looked the same, until the door opened, and Julian Morgan stepped in. His presence was immediate, like a cold front breaking over a warm day. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark tailored suit with sharp lapels, Julian didn't need to say a word to command the room. He didn't look around, didn't pause. His polished black shoes struck the marble floor with purpose. His skin, a deep, refined shade of brown, contrasted starkly against the white walls and brushed steel fixtures. His face was calm, but carved with precision, eyes steady, focused. He moved like someone who'd walked these halls before. Not these exact ones, maybe, but halls just like them. Places where power lingered in walls and justice was treated like decoration. He knew exactly what he was walking into, and he was done playing nice. Julian approached the front desk and stopped exactly 3 feet away. The receptionist glanced up, eyes locking with his. Her smile flickered, then faltered. Something about him made her sit up a little straighter. "Good morning," Julian said. His voice was low and deliberate, like each word had been measured before delivery. "I'm looking for my wife, Celeste Morgan. She had a 10:30 appointment with Dr. Caldwell." The receptionist blinked. She tapped on the keyboard, too slowly. Let me check. I think she's not in the room anymore." Julian's jaw twitched. "Where is she?" Her fingers froze. I believe she's downstairs, in the security office." Julian didn't blink. "Why?" I'm not sure, sir. There was something. A misunderstanding, maybe." "Dr. Caldwell, I need to see her. Now." There was no anger in his voice, just force, steady, unwavering, undeniable. "I'll get the floor manager," the receptionist stammered. "No need." Julian reached into the inner pocket of his suit. He pulled out a slim leather wallet, opened it. Inside was a gold-embossed federal badge, bearing the seal of the United States Department of Justice. Underneath it, his title, Deputy Director, Office of Civil Rights Enforcement. The receptionist's breath caught audibly. Julian let the badge hang there for exactly 3 seconds, long, enough for it to settle, to be understood, and then slipped it back into his coat. "Where is the security office?" She swallowed. "Down the corridor, past the staff elevator. First door on the left." "Thank you." Julian turned and walked. Each step echoed down the sterile hallway, bouncing off glass, metal, and nerves. He passed portraits of smiling newborns, words like excellence and care printed beneath them. He didn't stop, didn't blink, because his wife, his pregnant wife, was somewhere behind closed doors being treated like a suspect instead of a patient, and someone was going to answer for that. He reached the heavy gray door. Voices inside. He didn't knock. He pushed it open and stepped inside. The fluorescent light above flickered once, as if in warning. The air felt dense. Celeste sat rigid in a chair bolted to the floor, hands resting protectively over her belly, her expression a delicate mix of pain and restraint. Her eyes lifted as he entered, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she breathed. "Julian." He crossed the room in 2 long strides, placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I'm here, it's over." 2 security officers stood stiff against the wall. The older one blinked, confused. The younger one, the one who had chewed his gum like it was performance art, straightened up, startled. "Can we help you?" the older one asked, voice defensive. Julian turned, slow and deliberate. "Yes, you can help me by explaining exactly why my wife has been detained without probable cause, without counsel, and without access to her personal property." The room froze. The younger guard swallowed. Gum paused mid-chew. The older one raised his hand slightly as if warding off a blow. There was a report from Dr. Caldwell, a missing item. And you just assumed it was her? Julian's voice cut like tempered glass. Without evidence? Without protocol? We were following procedure, the older one muttered. Julian took a slow breath. You're not trained in constitutional law. I am. He pulled out his credentials again, held them in the air like a declaration. I'm invoking immediate oversight under federal civil protection, and unless you want this to escalate into a case of unlawful detainment and racial targeting, you will provide access to all surveillance footage from this wing, starting at 10:30 a.m. The younger officer shifted. The older one hesitated, then nodded. He turned to the console on the wall, fumbling for the controls. The monitors flickered. Black and white footage played in real time. 40 a.m. Celeste enters the room. Sits. Does nothing suspicious. 10:52 a.m. Dr. Caldwell enters. Fusses with paperwork. Sets a shiny object down on the tray. Leaves abruptly. Julian pointed. There. Freeze. Zoom in. The image sharpened. A silver Cartier watch. Lying undisturbed. On the tray, Celeste gasped softly. She left it. Roll it forward, Julian instructed. 54 a.m. A cleaning staff enters briefly. Wipes the counter. Never touches the tray. 59 a.m. Watch still present. Then, static. The camera cuts out. Julian turned slowly. And now, gentlemen, you understand what happens next. He reached for the drawer behind the desk, retrieved Celeste's phone and handed it to her like a sacred item. You've violated federal protections, he said. You've detained a black woman, pregnant, without evidence or cause. This isn't just procedural failure. This is civil rights infringement. The younger guard finally spoke. We didn't mean... Julian didn't even look at him. You don't get to mean anything when your actions are this loud. He turned to Celeste. You ready to go upstairs? She nodded slowly. Her hands were still trembling, but now they were steadying because justice had a voice again, and it had arrived wearing a badge. As they walked out of the security room, together, Celeste's steps were slow but strong because she wasn't walking alone anymore, and they hadn't seen him coming. The elevator ride was silent, but the kind of silence that wasn't empty. It pulsed. Thick with restraint, seething just beneath the surface. Celeste stood next to Julian, her hand in his now, fingers interlocked with quiet desperation. Her other hand stayed pressed gently against her belly. I'm okay, she whispered. Julian didn't look at her. You shouldn't have to be. When the doors slid open on the executive floor of Aurora Women's Pavilion, the atmosphere was instantly different. Gone was the sterile brightness of the lower wings. This floor was luxury. Frosted glass walls, muted designer lighting, soft carpets that muffled every step. It was designed to feel quiet, controlled, untouchable. But that illusion shattered the moment Julian stepped off the elevator with Celeste. Beside him, a hush rippled through the hallway. Nurses and staff members stopped mid-stride. A few administrators looked up from their tablets. The kind of hush reserved for when someone powerful walks in, and you know something's about to change. At the end of the hall, a woman in a navy suit with a hospital badge clipped to her jacket stood waiting. She was tense, polite, visibly rattled. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, she said quickly. I'm Lydia Tran, floor supervisor. We've been informed of the situation. Dr. Caldwell is inside with the Internal Ethics Board. They're expecting you. Julian nodded once. Celeste didn't speak. She didn't have to. Lydia opened the glass door to a sleek conference room. Inside sat 3 board members, 2 men, 1 woman, all white, all dressed in muted suits. None of them met Celeste's eyes. At the far end of the table sat Dr. Miranda Caldwell. Her white coat was gone, replaced with a tailored gray blazer. Her posture was perfect, arms folded tightly across her chest, her expression carefully arranged into neutrality. But her eyes, narrow, coiled, calculating, betrayed everything. Celeste and Julian took their seats on the opposite side. No one spoke at first. Then the board chair, a man with thinning white hair and reading glasses perched low on his nose, cleared his throat. Mr. Morgan, we understand you filed a formal concern regarding an incident that occurred earlier today, involving Dr. Caldwell and your wife, Mrs. Morgan. We'd like to begin by hearing your statement. Julian didn't hesitate. He placed a thin folder on the table, opened it with precision, and slid a printed transcript toward them. My wife was falsely accused of theft. She was detained without evidence, denied access to communication, and publicly humiliated while under your care. All of this while 6 months pregnant. He turned to face Dr. Caldwell directly. We have video footage proving that the watch you claimed was stolen was, in fact, left behind by you. Not only did my wife never touch it, she never even went near the counter. Dr. Caldwell's lips twitched, just barely. Julian continued. What's worse is what happened next. Instead of verifying facts, your staff assumed guilt. Based on what? Her being alone, or her being a black woman in a clinic that rarely sees one? The word hung in the air like a lit match. Black woman. Celeste didn't flinch. She met Dr. Caldwell's eyes, steady, unblinking. You looked at me, she said quietly, and didn't see a patient. You saw a stereotype. Dr. Caldwell's voice was sharp now. That's not true. I followed protocol. We had missing property, and I took appropriate action. Julian leaned forward. You didn't follow protocol. You followed prejudice. The board members shifted, visibly uncomfortable. The woman among them scribbled something quickly on a notepad. Julian placed a USB drive on the table. This contains the surveillance footage, as well as audio from the moment my wife was detained, including the guard mocking her, including the denial of access to counsel, including every civil rights violation you're now responsible for. Dr. Caldwell's voice cracked just slightly. I had reasonable suspicion. No, Celeste said. You had assumptions. You assumed I didn't belong here. You assumed my husband wasn't coming. You assumed I wasn't worthy of respect. Because I didn't look like the women on your brochures. The silence now was different. Heavy, guilty. The board chair looked up, his voice thinner. We'll review everything. This will trigger an immediate investigation. Julian stood slowly. You do that. He looked at them all. And while you're at it, prepare to explain to the licensing board why your lead physician racially profiled a pregnant patient and tried to cover it with false accusations. Dr. Caldwell stood, knocking her chair slightly. You people always play victim. Celeste stood now too, and when she spoke, her voice was calm, clear. I'm not a victim. I'm a mother, and I will not let my daughter be born into a world that thinks silence equals safety. For a moment, no one moved. Then Julian picked up the file, the drive, and turned toward the door. Celeste walked beside him. They didn't need applause, they didn't need validation. The truth was enough, and now it was on record. The press gathered like storm clouds. A dozen reporters stood behind a taped line, microphones extended, lenses zoomed in tight. Cameramen adjusted their focus, boom mics hovered overhead. The sun hung high over Aurora Women's Pavilion, but the tension below it crackled like thunder. It had been exactly 1 week. 1 week since the footage leaked. 1 week since Dr. Miranda Caldwell had been placed on indefinite leave, pending an ethics review and a civil rights investigation. 1 week since the clinic released a formal statement of apology that failed to mention Celeste by name, but mentioned regret and disruption and unfortunate misunderstanding. 1 week since Celeste Morgan decided silence was no longer an option. She stood on the front steps of the clinic, wearing a deep green maternity dress that curved softly over her belly. Her natural hair framed her face like a crown. No tears now, no trembling, just presence. Powerful, still undeniable. To her left stood Julian in a charcoal suit, arms crossed loosely, his eyes sweeping the crowd with a protector's focus. To her right, 2 prominent civil rights advocates, one local, one federal. Behind them, community leaders, friends, and a growing crowd of black women, some holding signs that read, "We belong in every room." Protect Black mothers. Dignity is not a privilege. The cameras clicked wildly as Celeste stepped forward to the podium. She gripped the sides, not out of fear, but to anchor herself. And then she spoke. "My name is Celeste Morgan." The mics hissed gently as they adjusted to her voice. "I am a teacher, a wife, and soon, I will be a mother." She paused, and in that breath, the entire courtyard leaned in. A week ago, I walked into this clinic for a routine appointment, something thousands of women do every day. But instead of care, I was met with suspicion. I was accused of theft. I was detained without reason. I was humiliated. Clicks from the press intensified. I was treated like a criminal for the crime of walking in as a Black woman, alone. The crowd murmured with quiet recognition. Heads nodded, eyes narrowed. They didn't ask what kind of mother I wanted to be. They didn't see my credentials or my appointment or my humanity. They only saw a narrative they've rehearsed too many times. She swallowed once but did not falter. But here's what they didn't see. They didn't see my husband coming, and they didn't see the truth waiting on camera. She turned slightly, locking eyes with the reporters. And now they'll see this too, because I won't be quiet anymore. A few in the crowd clapped, just a handful. But it was the kind of clapping that spread. I'm not standing here today because I want sympathy. I'm standing here because this happens all the time. To women who don't have federal lawyers, for husbands. To women who don't have the words or the platforms or the protection. She looked out again, and this time, her voice rose. But I'm here now, and I'm saying this to every Black woman who has ever been doubted, dismissed, or degraded in a place meant to care for you. You are not the problem. A wave of murmurs. Then louder applause. To the institutions that still train your eyes. To look through us before looking at us. We're done whispering. We will not shrink to make you comfortable. We will not accept apologies without accountability. Julian stepped slightly closer, his gaze proud, firm. Celeste finished. This isn't just about a watch, or a doctor, or even this clinic. It's about something deeper, systemic, institutional, and we're here to say that it ends. Here. Now. The crowd broke into applause, not wild but heavy, like the sound of something long overdue finally landing. As reporters began shouting questions, Celeste stepped back from the podium. Julian placed a hand on her lower back, gently guiding her off the steps. She took one last glance at the clinic behind her. A week ago, it had swallowed her. Today, she walked away from it taller. The press conference aired on every local station. Then national clips went viral on social media. A 12-second clip of Celeste saying, "We're done whispering," was shared by celebrities, lawmakers, and community organizers. A new hashtag emerged. Black women deserve better. In the weeks that followed, Aurora Women's Pavilion announced mandatory anti-bias training for all staff. A new oversight committee was formed. Civil rights groups launched investigations into other private medical facilities across the region. But for Celeste, the most meaningful moment came 2 days after the press conference. She was walking through a local farmer's market when a young girl, maybe 12, stopped her. She was holding her mother's hand. "You're the lady from the video," she said, wide-eyed. Celeste smiled. "Yes, that's me." The girl nodded, then looked down at Celeste's belly. "Is your baby okay now?" Celeste knelt slowly, placing a hand over her stomach. "She's perfect," she said. "And she's going to grow up knowing her mom stood up." The girl's mother said nothing, just reached forward and took Celeste's hand, gripped it and whispered, "Thank you." Celeste watched them walk away, and for the first time in weeks she felt the weight of it all shift. Not gone, but changing. Because she had found her voice, and it would never be silent again. If this story moved you, if it made you think, feel, or even question what justice really looks like, then don't let it stop here. Hit that subscribe button to join us on this journey of truth, justice, and powerful voices that refuse to be silenced. Like this video to show support for stories that matter, and most importantly, share this story with someone who needs to hear Because real change begins when real stories are told. Together, we amplify the unheard. Together, we rewrite the narrative.